So next we have Kate Berlin, who her journey in community-driven environmental stewardship began as a volunteer at Friends of Sausal Creek, where she worked at the native plant nursery and found inspiration in both the natural world and the people she worked alongside. As the current director of Friends of Sausal Creek, Kate plays a key role in changing thousands of Oakland residents in engaging thousands of Oakland residents with their local watershed and advocating for the protection of its vital natural resources. In terms of education, Kate earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Cincinnati in design, as well as a certificate of achievement from Merritt College in conservation and resource management. So let's welcome Kate with her talk entitled Collaborative Conservation Community Action to Transform Sausal Creek.
Hi, it's good to be here. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, sometimes I'm a little too far from the microphone. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's my first symposium. Thanks for having me. I am an aspiring plant person, but today I'm going to talk to you more about the people and the process of our collaborative conservation project. This took place in the very urbanized and densely populated city of Oakland. The project was the result of a truly collective effort. Many partners involved in bringing this to life, but I'd like to specifically acknowledge my colleagues Ella Matsuda, Elena Stanger, our former executive director Lisa Giordano, as well as our consulting partners Russell Prange from ESA and Janine Strickland from WRA. So Friends of Sausal Creek, or FOSC, as I'm going to call it going forward because that's a mouthful, is a volunteer-based community nonprofit organization that restores and protects the Sausal Creek watershed, and we've been in operation for 29 years. Community empowerment is at our core. In fact, the organization itself was founded by Creekside neighbors, and all of our habitat restoration and environmental education is done in collaboration with local residents and students. So volunteers on average contribute about 7,000 hours a year of service, and we host about 400 to 500 local students on field trips, partnering with teachers who are looking for those place-based experiential learning opportunities. We do this work in Oakland, the unceded ancestral land of the Ohlone people, on all city public lands. So these water droplets indicate about 20 sites that we steward in partnership with volunteer site leaders within the watershed boundary from the Oakland Hills down through many diverse neighborhoods and out to the estuary, which connects to the San Francisco Bay. So Sausal Creek is one of the most ecologically intact streams in Oakland, with a natural channel over much of its headwaters in the upper watershed, mostly flowing above ground through a couple of city parks. So here on the left, you're seeing one of our headwater streams at Fern Ravine, which runs through a second growth coast redwood forest in Joaquin Miller Park. On the right, by contrast, in most of the lower watershed, below Interstate 580, the creek is resigned to culverts and channelized reaches, which runs behind in the backyards of private residents. So this part of the creek is much harder to access. Making up much of the lower watershed is the Fruitvale District, a dynamic urban center home to a diverse mix of BIPOC populations, which contributes to the area's unique vibrancy. However, Fruitvale, like many urban neighborhoods, faces extreme environmental challenges that impact the health and well-being of its residents. So it's in the top 20% of California communities for the number of impaired water bodies, environmental cleanups, hazardous waste sites, and groundwater contaminants, particularly at the waterfront. So this is some of the groundwork. From 2018 to 2020, FOSC conducted a community partners needs assessment with the participation of over 300 community residents in the Fruitvale. And it identified a lack of safe open space, parks, and creek access where people, especially children, could interact with nature. So we did surveys and focus groups, engaging with students, health providers, community leaders at local hubs like the library, the rec center, senior centers. and also conducted interviews with community orgs like the Unity Council, the Native American Health Center, Holy Names College, and Peralta Hacienda. And then this needs assessment, which we have a few excerpts from on the left, informed an initial feasibility study completed in 2022 with Flow West, outlining opportunities to expand or create green spaces in the Fruitvale along Sausal Creek. So of the 5 study sites in that first feasibility study, we selected 2 to move forward with: Berry Place and Wood Park. These were areas that we wanted to investigate for next steps. So Berry Place on the left there is a small fenced-off city parcel on a corner near Fruitvale Ave, and it has an overlook to an actual open stretch of the creek, but it also is crowded with invasive trees and vegetation and has often been a dumping hotspot because it looks like an empty, overgrown lot. Wood Park is a more sizable and accessible 6-acre park with the creek actually culverted beneath it, primarily used for exercise and dog walking by local neighbors. It does have a longstanding active group of community stewards, but unfortunately it also attracts some unsavory activity and has a dense coverage of invasive trees and shrubs around the perimeter, which pose a fire hazard to neighboring homes. So through site assessment and gathering of community input, we developed this list of main concerns: illegal dumping, invasive species overgrowth, accessibility and safety, and drainage issues. And then in 2023, we sought out and were awarded funding for planning projects for these 2 sites. So the US EPA provided funding for the Wood Park project, and this was our org's first federal grant. And the Rose Foundation, who have been supporters of FOSC for many projects over the years, funded planning for Berry Place. And these were our objectives: to improve air and water quality and the overall health of the watershed, to build climate resilience, to develop a community of creekside environmental stewards, and increase access to safe, good quality public urban green space. So this is the framework that we use to engage local residents in collaborative decision making. So phase 1, across the top, I don't know if you could read that, included community input at planning meetings and one-on-one interviews, as well as volunteer opportunities to do natural resource monitoring and habitat restoration. And these volunteer opportunities are ongoing. Phase 2 was the creation of native revegetation and park improvement plans. So in addition to the local knowledge and input from phase 1, our consultant partners, ESA and WRA, conducted thorough assessments of the site's existing conditions and considered the economic and ecological feasibility of various restoration strategies. Phase 3 was to collect community input or feedback on those proposals, and phase 4 was the integration of the feedback into the proposals, along with the publishing of finalized plant palettes and cost estimates for implementation. And then throughout this process, transparency was key, and during all stages, we accepted feedback and integrated that. So first and throughout the project period, we conducted outreach to the community with a particular focus on the immediate neighbors of these spaces. Those were the folks that we identified were currently using the space and would be most affected by any changes that were made to it. So we created mailers and banners and flyers and did newsletter and email outreach. Some of our staff went door to door to neighboring homes and businesses and shared info about the project on field trips and community events. We held our community meetings in person on a bi-monthly basis and one-on-one interviews throughout the project. So on the top here at Berry Place, we actually met on the site in the parcel on weekend afternoons, and at Wood Park, we met on weekday evenings in the local school's library. And then after these meetings, we shared our slideshows and our recaps via email, and then folks who were able to attend then forwarded those on to their neighbors' listservs and Google groups, helping to expand our reach. These are some shots from one of our Berry Place meetings. So we welcomed urban planner and community activist James Rojas of Playset to lead the neighbors in a visioning and model building experience. So each of them kind of built like what they saw as their ideal creekside space out of craft materials. FOSC led regular habitat restoration work days, removing invasive vegetation, particularly French broom, which we have so much of, English ivy, and fennel. And one of the neighbors and biggest project proponents, Rick, stepped forward as the designated site steward of Wood Park, so he'll continue to carry on restoration with our support and guidance and lots of volunteers. We also engaged the community in water quality monitoring, training them how to collect data and record it at the 2 project sites and 6 other sites throughout the watershed for comparison. And this data will be shared on the California Environmental Data Exchange Network, CEDN. Then integrating the community's input, our consultant partners, ESA and WRA, produced proposals that we shared out in the fall for public comment. So the final proposals, while unique, prioritize water quality improvement, community connectivity to Sausal Creek, and native habitat enhancement. They include revegetation plans, bioswale designs, and improvements to the site entrances for accessibility and safety, and also captured our designs for contemplative seating spaces and signage that tell the natural and cultural history of the area, accessible and permeable paths, and overlook areas to enjoy the view. So we sent the documents out digitally so that neighbors could comment publicly or anonymously. We also welcomed feedback via email and one-on-one and printed off some of these too to share with folks who preferred it. As you can see here, a lot of the feedback we received was really positive comments. People were mostly happy that we had heard their voices and incorporated their ideas, and were really excited for something to finally start happening. So this was extremely rewarding feedback to receive. And here are the key accomplishments that we can celebrate from this year of planning, which included 10 public meetings with 120 attendees, 16 restoration work days with 270 volunteers, and just last month we planted 500 native seedlings from our nursery at the 2 sites. We learned a lot this year, so trust and relationship strengthening are key. So while this latest phase of the project went relatively quickly, a year in total for the planning, the efforts to build trust and relationships are long-ranging. So if you'll remember, the first needs assessment was started in 2018, and a lot can change in 6 years, like neighbors move and org personnel changes. The COVID-19 pandemic was in the middle there somewhere, and it's really easy to lose momentum between phases. So new trust and relationships have to be rebuilt between individuals. Luckily, we stand on our almost 3 decades of consistent collaborative work in this watershed, and so it's the word shared by our supporters that help new neighbors understand and trust us. Like, they've seen our commitment, they've been part of the action that has transformed the watershed thus far, and are willing to go forward with us. So we found that many Wood Park neighbors from the first phases were still around and really excited to move on to this next with next steps, and then they in turn helped to recruit others, whereas recruitment and relationships with neighbors at Berry Place took a little bit longer to cultivate. And we wanted to really make sure that we had enough and like a good representation of folks at the table before starting to make any decisions. Oops, that is not what I meant to do. Not yet. We're still learning. Meeting and feedback preferences really varied. So I think it was good that we provided multiple feedback outlets that captured a variety of opinions and perspectives. So some community members decided to only use the digital formats, while others only wanted to share opinions at meetings, and some folks did both. Navigating local government could be challenging. We had to learn how to best work with the City of Oakland and identify the stakeholders that would be integral to project success. We invited different department reps to speak at our meetings, like the Watersheds Division, Tree and Park Services, and also kept them abreast of plans as they developed. And our biggest hurdle with local government came in the fall. So our original plan was to submit these 2 final proposals through Oakland's capital improvement program for implementation, and that's the city's long-term planning and budgeting process for large-scale, long-term infrastructure investments. And so typically they accept proposals every 2 years, and our project aligned really well with their priorities. But in the fall, they announced that they would not be accepting new CIP proposals and are instead focusing on a backlog of projects in progress. So that felt like a really major blow at the time, but since then we've pivoted. We've made inroads with some alternative implementation resources. And among the most exciting unexpected outcomes of this project were the ripple effects. So namely, the establishment of a similar community-led restoration project just a couple of blocks away from Wood Park and Berry Place, led by local neighbors and FOSC volunteers. So after volunteering with us at Berry Place, these neighbors were inspired to go and do similar work at the fenced-off Creekside parcel near their homes, which was also one of the 5 sites initially identified in our first feasibility study. So they're holding monthly restoration work days, barbecues, and inviting neighbors to give their input on what they'd like to see in that space. Okay. Another benefit of activating Wood Park and Berry Place was including some of our other local partners to help improve the spaces. So we have a great partnership with Civicor. They came and repaired a decaying steep path of stairs that lead down the slope to the creek at Berry Place, and that was with funding from the HDR Foundation. Civicor also joined us for vegetation ID and invasive removal training days at Wood Park. And we host 2 6-week education and green skills training programs with Youth Employment Partnership each year. So our Spring Stream team and Team Oakland crews got the opportunity to learn and work in these green spaces, several of whom live near the project sites but had never visited them before. So we have 2 exciting shovel-ready projects in hand that have community support behind them. We're preparing to apply for implementation funding in 2025. We're in contact with the stakeholders at the City of Oakland from whom we need a commitment from. And we have 2 promising funding sources identified for proposal submission. Meanwhile, we continue to support community collaboration through habitat restoration and water quality monitoring and keep in communication with the project participants. Here are some photos of our winter solstice planting in December, where we put 500 native seedlings from our nursery in the ground at the 2 project sites. These plants, too, are all grown from seed and cuttings from the watershed that were collected and sown or propagated by our nursery manager and volunteers. And we're ramping up production of the plants identified in the final planting pallets so that we can meet the revegetation goals with more Sausal Creek native plants. So yeah, I offer this framework up. The framework and our experience in implementing it is definitely a work in progress, not a perfected model. We know there will be challenges as we move forward and launch new projects and continue to adapt and learn. So was just excited to share it with you today as a conversation starter, and really look forward to hearing more from you over the next couple of days. So I don't know that we have time for questions. Okay. Thank you.
Test. Hi. In 1991, you had the Oakland Hills fire that burned through the city and killed many people, as is happening in the Palisades now. And a contributing factor was the surrounding vegetation. And can you speak a little bit to how your project mitigates or could reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire there?
Definitely, yeah, that's a huge risk. And we're working in Joaquin Miller Park, in Diamond Park, and then even these smaller parcels that are in the neighborhoods, they're flush with eucalyptus and lots of acacia and French broom and very flammable invasive vegetation. So yeah, we host all over the watershed weekly habitat restoration work days where that's our focus, to remove the invasive stuff, plant in the native stuff. And that's also something that the city of Oakland helps out with. So they've already in these spaces removed some large trees that were posing a risk. And yeah, that's a really big concern. We also are partnering with CAL FIRE and Segura Te Land Trust up in Joaquin Miller Park to work on some similar fire hazard areas.
Great, thank you. This could be key to helping our city survive.
Absolutely.
Hi, Kate.
Hi.
You talked about Wood Creek having a culverted section. Was daylighting that culvert part of the project, or is it a future consideration?
That's a great question, yeah. So as part of the existing conditions assessment, that was a huge thing. We were like, that would be really exciting to have an open area of creek in the lower watershed. And the site is just not stable enough. So Wood Park is a really interesting place. It actually is a park because of landslides. So there used to be, it's kind of a bowl, and along the top were homes that in the 1930s and then again in the 1950s, and even as recent as 2006, there were landslides that destroyed homes. And so it's not very stable, and then the creek itself is buried about 20 feet below that at the bottom. So it was something that, yes, like some neighbors were really interested in. We were really interested in it. And then after kind of doing further assessments, you know, we're doing more of kind of a bioswale and awareness of the creek, and using different methods to kind of bring awareness to it. But yeah, unfortunately, does not seem like it's feasible. Okay, I'm out of here. Bye, thank you.